Okay, hello, peace be upon you. Assalamu alaikum. Uh, I'm going to dive straight into the answer without much of an introduction to myself. Maybe I'll introduce myself in a bit. You might be wondering, where is Bashir, the person who I normally debate with? He said last minute that he was. I asked him, can you say, can I give a quote as to why you won't join this discussion, even though we agreed on it last week? And he says it's a touchy subject. So, whatever. Um, so I put a link, a pinned link at the top if you're interested in joining the debate. Come on camera, or I'll just look at the comments in the live chat if there are any. And let's get on with it. So oh yes, so always have a document uh, where you can inspect afterwards. It's in the description, the summary of my answers. Does Islam support Hamas's jihad? And I'm not going to give a very complicated answer. There's far more in-depth answers, but that's not my style. My style is I want the average person to understand this. And so I keep it super simple. Uh, I like to also say why I'm bothering to talk about this at all. I mean, there's pretty serious stuff that's going on at the moment, so it should be self-evident in some ways. But um, the more obvious one is that because peace and happiness is possible, most people don't seem to realize that. They think it's like an impossible situation that hasn't been solved for 75 years or more, won't be solved anytime soon. And because it's complicated or something, right? I'm going to say otherwise. There's lots of evidence for that. I am going to, so besides telling you why the Quran says what Hamas is doing is wrong, I'm going to say what the solution is, because that's what I'm about. Solutions and keeping things simple. So there's the obvious problem, the genocide that's happening at the moment of the Palestinians, but also, Israel is suffering as well. Everybody's suffering. There are good Jews who are suffering, right? Anyway, so this could erupt in World War III. This is a pivotal part, there without getting to all the little that I know, even the little I know that it's a special place, right, for the West to control the Middle East, is what I'll say. And if this goes out of control, this could be World War III. So that's definitely going to affect people's happiness. But also, this this example is a heated example of how we, even within our Western societies, we don't know how to live together in peace. So this will give some hints about that as well. Okay, so short answer, no, Islam does not support Hamas's jihad. Here's why. So first of all, the Quran. So I'm a Muslim. If I talk on behalf of Islam, I should talk via its holy book, infallible book that all Muslims depend on as the word of God. Anyway, so first of all, if you do jihad, God promises you that He will help you. And by most people's definition or the way they see it, Hamas has always been losing in general. Okay, so I always give, as I say in the description, this document is available so you can click and see it as well. Some people number the verses and whatever differently, so that's why I put a link as well. Then you say Allah indeed has a power to help them. So this is talking about permission to fight. What are the rules and stuff like that? Okay, so that's one, and this doesn't be long. By the way, also, I'm guessing, because I'm not debating anybody at the moment, this might be quite quick. So there was somebody called Amir. He said, I really wanted to talk to or ask questions of Khalid. Jump into the discussion. I'm not sure which Amir this is. Might have spoken to him before. Anyway, And definitely, lots of Muslims are rightfully asking, "Where is Allah?" People are asking that. Where is God? Why is all this massacre happening? Why is God allowing this to happen? Actually, God has already given the answer in the Quran, but most Muslims really don't want to hear it. But I'll talk about it in a bit in terms of the solution. You might say, why would Muslims not want to know this answer to the solution? Well, usually, if you're doing something wrong, then you probably won't want to know the answer. It's like that kind of logic. But anyway, and you understand in a minute. And then there's a very famous song like "Where is the Mahdi?" Because the Mahdi is supposed to solve all the Muslims' problems. In fact, the Mahdi has given the answer. In fact, I'm a follower of the Mahdi, and our group is probably the only group that is giving the following answer based on the Quran. So anyway, when I say the following, the solution, which is at the bottom, coming up, alternative, up here, the real jihad. Um, so Allah's support. If it was real, the simple thing is to test if it's real jihad really quickly. Is if you're doing it right, Allah, you would have won. Allah would have supported you. Secondly, killing indiscriminately. So killing men and women. I put this document really quickly, so uh, you know maybe I should have wrote killing men and women or non-combatants. Okay, Quran. By the way, I should just say only one verse I'm referring to again and again, so it's pretty easy to check this stuff. Even my 3 points. Oh, just based on one verse. Okay, so you can't kill men and women and children um, because only you can only fight people who fight you directly. You can't say, "Oh, a baby, a baby Jew is allowed to be killed," as a lot of Muslims do say that, Palestinians included. Um, and I've got videos, by the way, about that on the bottom. So I give a lot of references where they say that kind of stuff. So you can't say that because, first of all, the example of Prophet Muhammad wasn't like that at all. And you don't know, there are lots of good Jews, and you don't know what they're going to do in the future, if they're ever going to work, fight in the IDF and stuff like that. So that argument doesn't work. It's not in the traditions of Islam or the behavior of Prophet Muhammad's example, his example, and the hostages. So when I say killing indiscriminately, we're talking about rockets, suicide bombing, which I've got a video about, like what Palestinians say about that. October 7th killed a lot of non-combatants, right? Even the hostages which are currently being held. I feel like I should, when I'm talking about myself, I do like to be corrected. So, okay, I'm going to correct myself. So, not really correct myself, but say, of course, I understand where Hamas is coming from. They're angry and all this kind of stuff. I'm not saying they're right, but I can understand their anger. Suppose that's what I needed to say. Anyway, carry on. Do tell me if I'm wrong with something in the live chat, non-live chat. It's up to you. But anyway, so again, hostages are not people that. I mean, maybe if there were, what's it called, army people, but as far as I know, they're women and children mostly, old people and stuff like that. People specifically not allowed to be fight in the example of Prophet Muhammad. I mean, not allowed to be attacked in a war. So hostages are not something Prophet Muhammad used to take. Um, After a war, he would have taken prisoners. That's a different thing. And yeah, that's the end of that. So don't have to make this long. Do check it out. What's the alternative? Probably the most important bit in a way, but people do need to know what is jihad in the first place. Certainly, Hamas need to know that. Um, so jihad actually means striving to be righteous, really. Okay. And what is the solution? God has given already. Okay. I should clarify. What is for a lot of people don't know really the meaning. Jihad doesn't literally mean fighting. In fact, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, "What did he say? We have returned from the lesser jihad, that is coming back from a battle, to the greater jihad. The greater jihad. When asked about what is the greater jihad, he replied, the struggle against one's own soul, basically working towards righteousness, and that is actually a solution for the very specific situation Palestine is in right now. Okay, the Quran actually talks about how to get the land back without would literally be given the land back. Okay, and I talked about this from a logical point of view. I've done like how many live streams have I done on this topic already? But anyway, I've talked about this in a number of times already. But if you're a Muslim and you believe in the Quran, then this should be enough for you, even if you don't understand the logic of it, right? It says, and already we have written in the book of David after the exhortation that my righteous servants shall inherit the land, and that land specifically is referring to Palestine. That's the Quran. Solution, done, finished. Okay, and it might sound like, oh, you definitely need a military war. I mean, I could talk about. I said I was going to keep this whole thing simple, but jihad, you have to make every effort. If you go into more detail, you have to make every effort for peace, not to fight. Okay, but just to be clear, how do we know that the land is referring to Palestine primarily? Can have a wider meaning, but it's referring to the book of David, the Torah, Old Testament, and it's referring to this bit here. And this bit here, the land, is known by experts to talk about Palestine. So it's very clear. Okay. And so this is the harsh bit. God has given his verdict. Palestinians are not good, and I've given. But I don't want to just leave it at that. How about this? Ahmadi Muslims, which I am, follower of the Imam Mahdi that all these songs are crying out for. It's like, where are you, Mahdi? Solve our problems. Well, he's come. Okay. And he's given the answer. And the answer is this. Look at the Ahmadi Muslims. Okay, I'll write this really quickly. I prefer to write Ahmadi Muslims, let me write that. Just do. Oh God, I don't even know what I've just done there. I'll leave it alone then. They're living in Israel, by the way. Lots of Ahmadi Muslims living in Israel, and like beautiful videos of how Ahmadi Muslims are collaborating. I'm trying to make contact with some of the people who are working with the Israeli government to fix things. You might say, well, you're not doing a very good job, all this kind of stuff. Well, we can't fix things on behalf of people who don't want to listen to us, right? But I've put links to YouTube videos of how Ahmadi Muslims are working with good Jews who don't want what Israel are doing, good Jews in Israel, okay? And working. Oh, look, you get a bit of a thumbnail. Okay, so you can see rabbis, Jews, Muslims, different people, different backgrounds, going to this is way before October 7th, but let's see what happens if I click on this. Oh, it's Twitter. Okay, so it goes to a video in Twitter. So listen, guys. Oh, Uncle Narish. Hey, you come to keep me company or what?
Hello, Khalid. Hi.
Oh, thank you. It's always good having you. Um, have you heard of much of what I've said so far?
I saw you speaking alone, doing your monologue, and I saw the invite, and I thought, well, let's sort of like join the debate because obviously I've got a few like sort of questions I want to sort of ask you, and I've got my own views on the appropriateness of jihad. So I thought, well, why not talk about it?
Great. So I'll just quickly say, I suppose I haven't done my intro, and I'll do Uncle's intro. I'm an Ahmadi Muslim. Ahmadis are just is a temporary name for uh, the followers of the revival of true Islam. When it's widespread, we will probably drop that. And Uncle Narish, he's not actually my uncle, but as Muslims say, we always say uncle, auntie, everybody is a brother or sister, uncle, auntie, whatever, um, in the, how do you describe it? The human family. So, um, yeah, I could go into all these things about how the only bits I haven't gone to, I'm not really desperate to go into in more detail, is the problems amongst the Palestinians that they've even said of themselves, like adultery and stuff. But I don't really want to go into that necessarily. I think I've outlined the main points. So, Uncle, what do you want to ask me?
I don't know. It was the whole idea. Do you think that this is a jihad?
So, no. So, the fundamentals of jihad is you only, first of all, you would win. That's what Prophet Muhammad, the Quran says you would.
Yes.
Okay. And then, second of all, and this is just from the Quran. Um, and then, second of all, you can't kill anybody except for somebody who's in the army. You can't say everybody, like a lot of these Palestinian Muslims do. They say, if we shoot rockets into Israel and it kills a child, that's allowed. That's not allowed. They're completely wrong. Um, yeah. So basically, it's wrong. There's a lot more that could be said about it, but the very basics of jihad, they don't meet up with. Now, I understand that they feel definitely oppressed and stuff like that. They feel hopeless and they feel like there's no alternative, but that's the basics of Islam on that. Yeah. Any, what do you think about that? Or
I don't know. My view of jihad was simply self-defense. It wasn't the idea of conquering other people. It was the idea of defending yourself if your faith was being attacked by external forces. And in this kind of situation, I'm not quite sure exactly what's going on, but I find the situation very curious. How suddenly, like one war in like Ukraine and Russia suddenly stops immediately, and we have a completely new distraction. Uh, I'm not really sure exactly what's going on, and we don't want World War Three, but there's a lot of questions as to are we being manipulated. And the reason why I say that was obviously Israel is smack in the middle of Arab territory. It's a Jewish island in the middle of Arab lands. They've got, how would you call it, Mossad, the intelligence agency. They've got nuclear weapons. They've got intelligence way above any other country. I mean, even to the point they spy on every other country. They know what other countries
Mhm.
are doing before they know it.
Yeah.
I, I find it really hard to believe that suddenly we're going to have 6,000 rockets coming over from Hamas, right? And the Israelis did not know about it. I also, from the news, actually found out that the
I
Egyptian
agree with you,
government,
by the way.
the,
I
the,
think it was by purpose, the whole thing. But I think they call it a red flag or something. I can't
false
remember.
flag, false
False
flag.
flag, that's the
Yeah,
one. Yeah.
I almost feel like someone's trying to stir the pot to create the idea that there is a jihad. And in many ways, I'm totally against war because I think what war is basically what young men imagine heroes to be. But I think if
Mm.
you've seen any kind of conflict and you see what the sort of collateral damage is, I don't think anybody would be for war. But I think Islam is also in a very, very strange position because most of the Arab countries are full of rich resources. And at the moment, there is that decline in the West. Their sort of hegemony is seeming to be on the decline and they want to sort of reassert their power. And
Mm.
strangely enough, there's a lot of resources just off the coast of Palestine, isn't there? There's gas and huge oil reserves.
Yeah.
So it almost seems like that, they want the Muslim world to unite under a jihad simply so they can usher in a war.
Mm.
And to basically at the end of the day, remove the Palestinians from where they are, and for the Western masters, which is America basically, to have full access to its resources. Because at the moment, it's cut off from the OPEC nations. It's got a
Hmm.
huge fuel problem. We've got winter here at the moment, and people are too frightened to use extra gas because in
Hmm.
England at the moment it's a question of whether you can heat your home or whether you can feed yourself. So there seems to be this big play for the resources just off the coast of Palestine. And I just wonder if really this idea of jihad is simply other people trying to manipulate a religious belief.
Yeah. So I think that's so. You made some interesting points. I'll try to remember some of them. So yes, Islam does allow self-defense. Okay, and the wording is very clever. Permission rather than you must. And the reason is because if you go into the other verses related to this, there's always how can you possibly find peace otherwise? Okay. So self defense is good. Jihad is very specifically to religious situations. So it's not, you can't say it's religious, even though the vast majority of Palestinians are Muslims. There are Christians who are being persecuted. Um, it's just a land grab. There's even Jews, basically, Jewish Palestinians. So it's just a land grab. That's what it's really about. And I like to repeat that there are Ahmadi Muslims, and I put videos for people to watch because people have a very they ha- they have a very simplistic idea of what's happening in Israel. They think you're either for or against. You're either against the Zionists or you're on the Palestinian side. They don't imagine that there could be any solution. Um, Yeah, and but why are Ahmadi Muslims living peacefully? And by the way, they were heavily persecuted in I think 1948 when the Israelis really started, um, trying to ethnically cleanse the Muslims and the Palestinians from the land, and but they were told a very specific advice from our Khalifa, the second Khalifa at the time. Our Khalifa is like spiritual leader. He said, "Don't give up your land." Now I'm saying something different now because the Palestinians didn't listen to that advice. Um, you might say they didn't willfully give it, but a lot of them did. And now Ahmadi Muslims have a very nice place in a place called Haifa in the coast, and they live peacefully with the other Muslims. With the Jews, they have very good relationships with the rabbis. There's lots of video. I've got videos of that. I've just selected two, um, and I'll very briefly say that if you're always really angry, you're really not going to make friends. Like I've got a Zionist friend. I won't say too much because he basically asked me for like, help in different ways, right? So I won't say too much more about that. But and he hates Islam, but I'm friends with him, and maybe that's much easier than when if your parents' heads were blown off, right? I understand that, right? Well, I probably don't understand that really. I can't really understand that. But what I'm saying is that um, you got to find love for everybody. You got to have peace with everybody. This is the example of Prophet Muhammad. He was treated incredibly badly. Many of his friends and family were killed by his enemies, and he forgave them. That's not always the way, but it often is the way. And this is the example of Prophet Muhammad the way forward. Um, I don't know if that helps explain anything, but I think there is a reality that there is a way forward peacefully. Um, and I have talked about how um, through peaceful talks, there is a very realistic way of taking over Israel in different ways. So one is, yeah. So like the short answer is something like this. You know how Muslims are taking over the UK?
Yeah,
I'm not sure if you, yeah.
yeah,
How are they doing it? No weapons. Um, there are principles that make you successful. In short, they're called righteousness. The Quran talks about that. It says, if you are righteous, you will inherit the land. Inherit means you just take it, they will give it to you. Okay. Muslims are not really wanted in the UK, but because other people are not following principles that are success principles, basically righteousness. Um, their populations are dying out and all that kind of stuff. And Muslims who are not far from perfect follow some basic ideas that make them successful. Uncle, please tell me what you're thinking about this. I talk
Well,
a lot when I get
no,
started.
that's great, Khalid. It's good to hear your thoughts. I mean, you were saying that you had a solution. So, what is that solution that you think might work in resolving the Palestine situation? You want about like Muslims taking over, as they are in the UK and maybe in Europe simply by numbers. But how would that work out in resolving the Palestinian and Israeli conflict now?
Right. Okay. So the solution is righteous behavior. Maybe that doesn't make sense. I'll keep it short because I think I explained it, but maybe I was talking so long that it got skipped or got missed. Okay, so I'll try to say really in short term. There are already Ahmadi Muslims, the kind of Muslims that Muslim I am, that are living peacefully and very well. They've got businesses in Israel. Does that surprise you? Let me break it down. Does that surprise you?
No, not at all, because you get along with people, you don't force your ideology, you don't seem to misbehave or act aggressively, and you're open to interfaith discussions. So you seem to be like the ideal Muslims that I would quite be happy to live next to as a neighbour, as opposed to somebody who was displaying other types of Muslim behaviours.
Right. So that might give you an idea as to how Muslims could take over, but it's not necessarily. I'll suggest something even more weird because I was kind of keeping this back. But um, as Ahmadi Muslim, we're told to convert the Jews to Islam, like not
Hmm.
forcefully, just through arguments. Um, and I mean, I could go into why, and basically the Jews themselves have been told you can come to this land by God, but not necessarily that they can have it. They were told that they can have the land. I mean, I've gone through the references if they are righteous. So it's not for us to say they can't have the land, um, but they're not behaving righteously. And you might say, how comes they got the land? Because it's a temporary thing at the moment. Might not seem temporary, but if you look at what's happening in Israel, it's imploding in itself. There's different factions in Israel. The vast majority are the Zionists who first came were not religious. They are liberals. There's a big gay scene there, all sorts of conflicts within the society, and it's ready to collapse. It depends heavily on Palestinians. So this is kind of further my. I'm going to try to keep it short. Okay, let me ask you a question. So basically, okay. So are you aware that there are a lot of factions in Israel and they're fighting each other and there's a lot of problems with even forget the Palestinians being there or not.
I knew there was different factions within Israel, but I didn't realise they were fighting each other. We don't get access to that kind of news, but yes, I understand there are many different types of Jews living in Israel who don't all share the same ideology.
Sure, they're like the extreme religious types
Yeah,
who generally don't work. That's very interesting,
yeah,
isn't
the
it?
Orthodox ones.
Right. They're there just to keep up the population because they have like 10 kids each, right? Whereas the liberals, just like in the West, they don't really have children. Okay. There's a strong correlation between your principles, your religious values, and the number of children you have. So that's a massive problem if the vast majority of the population are not having enough children, because then how are they going to say this is the Israeli states and this is the Jewish state and there's no Jews left? Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
There's a there's a lot of fundamental problems. Did you also know that a massive part of the working class, the people who keep society going in Israel, are Palestinians who come from Gaza and basically Palestinian lands?
Yes.
Does that surprise you?
No, I've heard about that. They work in the service sector. So a lot of people come over to sort of like find work or daily work or whatever within Israel.
So I'm talking about from Palestinian land. So we're
Yes.
told this story that the West Bank and whatever are places where you can't get out of. Actually, they do all the time,
Yes.
right? But they have to go back, right? But we kind of, I am, I don't want to say it's like a holiday camp in Gaza. Very bad there, right? But I think we need to give the real picture so we can get to a solution. Okay. So, why is it important to know that Israel? So, there's a thing like the foundations, right? The foundations of a society are not the people at the top, they're people at the bottom. Like when we were in the so-called pandemic and we were clapping for heroes, who were we clapping for? We were clapping for the dustbin men. Do you remember this? This is a UK thing.
No, I totally remember. I totally remember.
Right. So in the UK, we were stood outside because we were told to be basically prisoners of in our houses. So we stood outside and we would clap in the evenings for the nurses and whoever was still working, right, going out, right, including the dustbin men. Why do we clap for these bedrock people? It's because without them, everything would collapse. If the dustbin men didn't do their job, we'd be dead from all the other viruses and rats and stuff like that. What I'm trying to get to, and this is actually an Islamic principle to take care of the people at the bottom because they are the foundations. In the same way, the Palestinians are actually foundations, the foundations of Israel's society. Most people don't know that. This is very important strategic thing to know. Do you get that if when they go, Israel's in big trouble? Can you see the idea? Like if they are
I,
the
ca-
foundation,
I know that because they're issuing what is it, visas willy nilly to the half the Indians to come over to do work.
right?
So
They're asking,
they're desperate for migrant workers. That's a fact.
right? They're asking for 100,000 people from India
There you are.
already,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So people are generally very unaware of what's happening in Israel, and they don't know how fragile it is. They don't know. I mean, there were huge protests against. I still can't say his name. Bibi. We just call him Bibi, right? Maybe because this of his nickname. Just like
Yeah.
with you, I forget. Now, now you put your name. Now I can remember it. But if I can say Bibi, I'll never learn his real name. Netanyahu, wherever it is, right?
Yes.
Benjamin Netanyahu. I think that's
Yeah.
probably the way it is, right? So, um, there were massive protests against him. Nothing to do with this is way before October 7th thing that Palestinians did, right? Um, there are massive problems there because there are massive clashes between the different kind of people in Israel. Very different kinds of people. And so it's kind of like a minority extremist group that seem to be controlling the government, even though the vast majority are not extremists. They're not even religious at all. They don't even believe in God, a lot of them. Um, so Israel is ready to collapse. It depends on Palestinians more than people realize. But why is it not all coming together? Because I'm trying to say it a different way, but if they were righteous, let's say they were all like Ahmadi Muslims. And by the way, you've got judges and stuff like that who are Muslims already, right? Sorry, did I say it? So there are Muslim judges in Israel.
Yes.
There are lots of people who've got powerful positions, right? So imagine they were all Ahmadi Muslims. Ahmadi Muslims already got good contacts with people in Israel. Imagine what would happen over a matter of time. Like it'd be harder, first of all, to call them bad names because everybody knows, like, we don't even fight. We don't ever throw rocks. All this kind of stuff. We never do that, right? Um, so it's really hard to say bad stuff about them. I mean, it sounds terrible me saying this, like, but Palestinians do give reasons for people for the Jews to hate them, even if it's small reasons and it's not justified really. And the Jews, the Zionist Jews, I should say, are incredibly bad. Like you really can't hate the Ahmadi Muslims because they just say nice stuff all the time, right? Um, so eventually, Ahmadi Muslims would take over. is one way of looking. Just for the same reasons Muslims are taking over the UK. They're not wanted, but they are. Um, I don't know. That's only in part of the solution. There's more of a solution than that. But does that make any sense so far? Can you tell me if there's anything confusing about that?
No, no, I quite like the idea of Ahmadi Muslims taking over. That to me like sounds like a good solution to a lot of the problems that we might be facing with the rise of Islam. But no, I mean, Khalid, you talk about peace, and I fully understand where you're coming from because the promised Messiah preaches like non-violence or violence in its proper place, really, as this. What would you consider the proper place that would actually make you pick up a gun? What would it take, or would you just remain totally peaceful and say, I'm not going to take part, I'm going to remain a pacifist? Or is there some kind of breaking point where you're saying, I'm drawing the line in the sand, I'm an Ahmadi, I believe in peace, but this goes too far?
Sure. So, a lot of the top generals in the beginning of Pakistan's existence, maybe even now, I'm not sure, were Ahmadi Muslims. Many people they fought in the Kashmir Wars. Many Ahmadis fought in the Kashmir Wars. So they do it when the government says they should, right? And
Yeah,
they're part of that. So that's one. There are some extreme situations when Ahmadis have picked up a gun, like when there was terrorist attacks, when they're literally being shot and they would shoot back.
yes,
In those situations, um, so very limited. Even though we like, especially in Pakistan, we've been heavily persecuted and killed, but we've been told no by our leader, no, you don't. Just leave. If you really don't want to stay any longer, just leave. And there are many long-term wins for that. Okay, and it's a similar thing I am telling Palestinians. So I want them to live. So I try to get. I want everybody to live, be happy, and all this kind of stuff, right? So if they're not going to be righteous enough according to God's standard, because the Quran says basically it's telling Palestinians you're not righteous enough, and there's lots of evidence provided. Right? They think adultery is fine, they think suicide bombing is fine, even if it kills innocent people. These are lots of really basic things that they are doing wrong, and they're on video saying this kind of stuff, right? So I've listed them in the document below, links to the YouTube videos. Um, so let's say they don't meet the righteousness standard, right? And I really want them to live. So I'm not going to say, hey, never mind, you should die. The Quran also says if you leave for the sake of God, so maybe the whole society won't do the right thing, but maybe one or two people will do the right thing, right? And they'll leave for the sake of God to another land, God will reward them.
yeah,
Okay. Now, that's not just a belief system, it's practically what happens, especially if you're a immigrant, you tend to work harder. People become successful. There's a lot, you can see all of the UK as an example of that, right?
yeah, yeah,
Um, and actually, it's definitely not a theory because Palestinians have been incredibly successful, millionaires, okay, uh, in Jordan, for example, all over the Middle East. People say there's a kind of a lie that's spread by, let's say, Zionists, and sometimes we swallow that lie that the Arab countries don't take Palestinians, right? They don't take them as refugees, but if you don't work, you're welcome. Okay, I know because I'm living in Jordan. Most of the country is Palestinian, and even the Palestinians who live here, they go to the Emirates and really do very well. I would say they do much better than people They live much better in Jordan than people in the UK, the Western people live in the
yes.
UK. Like you were talking about, like you've got to choose between um,
Heating and
eating
eating, yeah,
or heating and stuff like that. I live in places where we're surrounded by mansions all the time. Like loads of people have mansions, not everybody, but loads of people do.
yes.
Food is cheap. The food quality is about a million times better. You pay 5p for a massive piece of bread that'll feed you easily and it's freshly made. You'd have to go to some fancy pants place in London to get freshly made food. Like we don't eat the nasty bread that
Yeah.
Westerners think is actually good bread, right? You know the loaf of bread that you get, it's
Yes.
got loads of chemicals to keep it
I
soft and
know.
stuff.
I
We're
know.
talking about like the good stuff that poor people have, right? So people are really happy here. Um, and I even made a video, I think in early when the conflict started or something, and somebody thought it was really rude that I made this video. I said, here's a Palestinian friend of mine. Look at his mansion. It was so huge. I didn't
Yes.
know when the house was finishing, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So, and he's an immigrant from Palestine, right? Just an
Yeah.
example of the truth of this verse of the Quran that I didn't point out in this one because I pointed out in earlier ones, in earlier live streams. So, like, I'm trying to give a different ways of solving the problem and solving the problem in a way that already happens, not even theory.
No, Khalid, I totally agree with you. I mean, migrants that go to other countries, like my parents did back in the end of the 50s, they came here with a very strong work ethic. The Pakistanis, the Sikh community, etc., they came. We had corner shops that were open all hours. We worked like nobody's. And they worked really, really
I
hard.
haven't seen corner shops. They've stopped using that word.
Yeah. But
But
they were,
yeah,
yeah, but
definitely.
I mean, the migrant work ethic was very, very strong. With subsequent generations, that has been diluted. But what it is now, Khalid, what we're getting is large influxes of Muslims wanting to search for a better life, and they're coming over to the West. Now,
Mm,
the thing is, on one level, you can say mixing might be okay, but we're now starting to see uh, uh, an emergence of the right wing ethic. Your podcast on multiculturalism. It's like suddenly the Netherlands, which where they allowed prostitutes in windows smoking
mm.
pot, suddenly having this extreme right wing reaction to immigration and sort of not allowing any more migrants coming into this country. I'm just wondering if that's going to be a complete hindrance, really, into helping Muslims assimilate. Because with Geert Wilders, for instance, he's already isolated himself. He's saying, "Okay, you the Muslims that are here, you can stay here, but no more." You know, it's like you can't build any more of your mosques. You can't sort of use your culture. Now the thing here is, it's like say Muslims wanting to take over Israel. Are they going to see that same ethno
Mm.
group sort of like we are superior? You will do as what we say. You know, it's like almost creating an apartheid where the indigenous population will try to sort of put itself above
I
the
would put it
migrants.
like this. Yeah, so you've got a really good comparisons. Like we've got places like Holland where you got Geert Wilders and he's saying like we don't like brown people, we don't like Muslims, and Israel's an really extreme version of that, where they have literally apartheid, right? So way more discrimination of Muslims. So great comparison. And you might say, okay, what happens when, just like in England and European countries, Muslims become too popular, according to my theory, that they will become popular if they just calm down a little bit, stop fighting, and just be part of the economy. Um, then there'll be Jews and like, we've had enough. You guys are being too successful, you Muslims. We want to get rid of you. Guess what? You know what? Must just let's call it free market economics, right? Okay. I'm not even sure if that would be the case in that scenario, but basically, okay, Muslims move somewhere else. Move somewhere else. If you're not wanted, move to Jordan. You're going to have a fantastic time, and then the country's going to collapse on itself. And you can see that, like in Britain, right? One of my friends is a farmer. He said like prices went up to like from £20 to £80 for all these like metal and stuff like that because of the Brexit, right? So people can stop being racist and say we don't want you, and then when the people they're saying we don't want you to, the immigrants, when you say we don't want you, immigrants go away, the country will collapse in itself and say, oh, we screwed up. The white people, let's just keep it simple like that. Like let's keep it simplistic. The white people, the natives, will be like, oh, we didn't want the immigrants, and then we lost. We shot ourselves in the foot, and then they'll realize it. And if they don't realize it, and the whole country collapses, and there's no country left, let's say this is what happens to Israel. It might be hard to believe, but just look at what's happening, and then you'll believe it. So let's say the country collapses on itself, all by itself, no effort needed. Then you get the land for free. You just walk in. It's like, yeah, go on. Tell me how I'm wrong.
No, I wasn't saying that you was wrong. I was sort of like going along with your idea
Yeah.
that ultimately at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how it works. None of the Western countries can do without migrants, be it Indian or Muslim. Their birth rates have gone down to the point they're so low that they haven't got enough young people to look after the old people.
Yeah.
Hence they're trying to import more and more care workers and other people to run the services because they haven't got enough of a population. So to start with a right-wing philosophy isn't going to be very practical. But yeah, they can kick all the brown people out, but you're quite right. Who the hell's going to wipe your elderly's arses and cook your
That's right. They're
meals?
all black and brown and stuff like that.
All the migrants are the ones with the work ethic. A lot of the British people are quite happy just to be lone parents, look out babies, and that's about it. They don't really sort of, I don't know, have that same kind of attitude. I think to have a right-wing government is just going to kick themselves in the balls, so to speak,
Sure.
because it's too late now. You need the migrants. You've put yourself in a situation about migrants. Your population isn't going to like it, but that's a bit called tough luck, isn't it? Really, I mean, your government should have done something about it ages ago. But now that the whole
Well,
of
they
the West,
can't really, unless, like Claire, our friend Claire is saying, of secular Quranism, unless they decide on some sort of religious ethic, because those ethics or values are the things that enable us to have children, like people who are religious to have children. It's very strongly linked. So unless these say right-wing governments or any government says, guys, you got to adopt a religion, otherwise you're finished, because that's literally, people don't realize that is the reality, then people are going to be finished. I think the reality maybe, I don't want to go into too much, but there was, so I don't want to sidetrack too much, but I don't think the white people are going to die out. They'll just become Muslim, I think. It'll be, so you won't have a choice eventually, or I did tell the white people to become Christian, but it's not like a belief you can really take seriously.
Khalid,
Yeah, go on.
because they no longer have a culture to hold on to.
Yeah.
It's like they're not going to have a culture within say 3 generations. Each
Hmm.
generation, because the white men aren't, how do you call it, masculine enough. The indigenous women are going to be breeding with other migrants that are coming over.
Yeah.
So the next generation, then the next generation, by the time the third generation comes, I think the indigenous population is going to be a myth. You are actually, it's a bit like when the Vikings came over, the Anglo-Saxons came over. They're going to be incorporated into the society within 3, 4 generations. The British or the English won't. I mean, sad or whatever way you want to look at it, but I think it's a fact. We are. I
Yeah.
mean, we're at the stages where it's like that's what's going to happen, and there's nothing anyone can do to change it. Basically, the
Yeah,
world's
I don't
going to
want to
change.
get. Yeah, I'm trying to avoid going into too much about what will happen to the white people because I want to try to stay on this thing. But I do think eventually brown people will just move back
Well,
to the Middle East and
it's
stuff.
not even brown. I mean, the majority of the people coming in, they all have religious backgrounds, and a predominant large amount of them are Muslim. Now,
Yeah,
if Muslim men have children, they will automatically teach them to become Muslim.
yeah,
And no matter what your colour is, because across Islam, it isn't just brown people who sort of follow the teachings of Islam. It's white, black, and everything. I think that ideology is going to be perpetrated more into society, where they're more likely to teach their children the values of their religion or the Quran or whatever religion that they follow, whereas the white people aren't doing it. And over time, you are going to find that as the nation gets mixed, they will unite under a religion. And the way things are going, Britain is on its way to becoming an Islamic country. You know,
yeah, sure.
whatever,
I mean,
I think there's
yeah,
no argument about it. Most of Europe is, if you look at it, within 3 generations, it's going to be very, very difficult to turn around and say, well, what is the ethnicity of people who've been born here like six, seven, eight generations?
Yeah,
You know,
sure.
they will be
But I
German.
want to try to focus on Israel. I know this is a very important discussion, and we did make some connection between what's happening in the UK and stuff like that, and why the idea I've put forward that Palestinians can take over Israel will work because we've got demonstrations all over Europe, examples all over Europe. Um, but I want to try to focus on like, is there anything else that I mean, most people don't think. People, okay, let me put it this way: people are shocked when I say Palestinians if they're not accepted in Israel, and there'll probably be a point when if all the Palestinians started, let's say, I don't know, started moving to Israel, the Jews will say, no, no, thank you. We really want to get rid of you, right? Because that's what they're trying to do. We could talk about why, if you're interested, there's different ways we could have this discussion. Like, what are the Jews really up to? And I say Jews, I say Zionists. What are they really up to? And then the other thing is, what is the solution? I like to talk about the solution, really. So people are shocked when I say leave Palestine. Do you think that's a really shocking thing? Because there's only one person in my earlier video where I was just debating with a rabbi in the comments who said, you know what? There's something right about that. And my basic argument is, do parents have the right, besides all the other arguments I've given, do parents have the right to sacrifice their children for land? Because that's what's one of the major choices being kept in Gaza, because the Jews are very happy for them to live in Sinai or somewhere else. What do you think? I mean, is it really shocking thing to
Well,
say that the Palestinians should leave Gaza?
it bothers me that if I was in a similar situation, I would feel very, very aggrieved that I would have to leave my ancestral lands or whatever way I viewed them, you know, the place of my birth, just to sort of appease another country because they were being violent towards me. So on that basis, I would find it slightly unacceptable.
Sure,
Whereas,
but let me
where,
make it. Go on. Where you go on?
Whereas on the same as you are, I desperately want peace. You know, I don't think that violence in any way, shape, or form is the answer.
But let me
And
put it this way. I like to make it like so people realize there isn't. I don't think there really is a choice. Okay, like you got a house. Okay, you got a choice. Either you keep your house, or okay, I'm gonna make it sound as brutal as possible because it is brutal in Palestine at the moment in Gaza, right? I'm gonna come to your house and I'm gonna give you a choice. I'm gonna either kill your children or you keep your house. You got one or the other. Which one are you gonna go for?
I'm going to take my children and I'm going to leave.
Right. That's the ugly choice that people are not willing to discuss, right? That is how real it is, right? And there are Palestinians who are saying they rather all their whole family die. They're
No,
literally saying that, right? It
that,
sounds
that's sad.
brutal and it sounds terrible, okay? But but I want to dig into that a little bit, right? Because there's a whole bunch of stuff I haven't said before, so I'll say it now, sort of thing, right? So I've got a father-in-law, and we kind of a joke about what he does. This is something about Arabs are beautiful people, but they're very emotional as well, right? Okay, and my father-in-law, the joke is that if somebody robs him of one, like he's so generous, like anybody can come to his house and he will let them stay, right? There's all these weird contradictions I want to talk about. So anybody can come to his house and they'll let him stay, and he wants them to stay forever and all this kind of stuff. But on the other hand, if somebody swindles one, let's say, pound out of him, he will spend £100 in the courts to get that £1 back. It's kind of like, I don't know what the word for that is. It's a sort of stubbornness, right?
Yeah.
And there's a similar stubbornness in the Palestinians. Now, you might call it more than stubbornness, and that's not a fair depiction. Or, these people literally maybe I can't really appreciate it, but these people literally in Palestine lived there for hundreds of years, right? I was listening to a video of somebody who said like they can trace their family back 700 years.
Yeah.
We, I've got no idea about how that feels like, right? Okay, like I mean, I've been, my family's been in England since 1950. That's not a long time, right? And I've, you know what I mean? We don't. I've got no idea, and they, you know, you know, tended the land. They know the land like nobody does, right? In Palestine, the olive groves and all that kind of stuff. Sure, that's a reality, and they've got a connection to it. They're rooted there, but still, it's a choice. I understand. You know, they're willing to see. They should. Okay, maybe here's my point. Like we are. Here's a dangerous argument, right? We are in the West making heroes of Palestinians who are killing, in effect, sacrificing their children, and we should be careful about that. When we protest, we should protest Israel are doing wrong, but maybe talk to Palestinians, say, guys, we don't want your children to die. Don't make yourself heroes sacrificing your children.
Khalid,
That's a harsh argument, but what do you think?
I totally agree with you. I mean, the thing here is, first of all, regardless of the situation, I don't believe in the protests that are currently happening in the
No?
UK. I don't believe that anybody should be marching saying free Palestine, pro Hamas kind of rubbish. And I don't think that we need the sort of people who support Israel counter marching, right, saying, support Israel against Hamas. I think we're all being deceived here. What we should be doing, really, is
I
like all
just
this.
want to clarify. I don't think I'm not against the marches because I don't think the marches are pro Hamas. They are pro stop. They're ceasefire marches.
Yes, but what I'm saying is it would be much more useful if they were all outside the Houses of Parliament saying to our unelected government, you do not represent us. It's like if you stop supporting bloody Israel, you start
Mm,
pulling out, then the people are going to be happy. Oh, everything's going to get resolved. We don't need ethnic groups on the street. Britain at the moment is not, the government is not representing its people. If they
mm.
stop supporting Israel, that's a bloody start. And it needs the rest of the European countries to stop supporting
Okay,
Israel.
let's talk about what's happening then, because clearly England, the government hasn't listened to these people for a very long time. We had 2 million people, at least 1 million people on the Iraq war march. The government didn't care, right? So it's not really democracy. It's just musical chairs,
Yeah,
like it's just it's if it's Labour or Conservative, they have the same foreign policy of stealing oil and stuff like that. So there's somebody else pulling the strings, right? But does that mean we're helpless and all this kind of stuff? No. Um, what is the solution? So I mean, what's really happening in Israel? What's really happening in the West? What's going on? I'll put it something I roughly touched on it. It was something like, yeah, I think Israel definitely doesn't care about the Jews living it. I mean, the people who run Israel, like Bibi, definitely
yes,
does
yeah.
not care about his people. He's happy to sacrifice them. That's kind of really obvious. There's loads of evidence that if they've got hostages, Jewish hostages, they will just, and they know there's lots of people and they can be saved. They won't save them. They'll just get a tank and blow up the whole building. This is well known. Right now, where they're bombing all of Gaza with hostages in Gaza, they absolutely don't care. So just get that out the way. They really don't care. These are just pawns. The Jews, everybody living in Israel, are just pawns. Everybody's pawns. Palestinians are pawns. Some sort of materialistic plan. Okay, there's a new Silk Road from India all the way through um, Israel. There's all sorts of plans, and I wouldn't be. I kind of feel like I was talking to a Jordanian yesterday. It's like even the Saudis are into it. In it, right? They're building cities along this new Silk Road trade route, basically, um, neon and all this kind of stuff. It's all planned out. Nobody cares about human beings. It's all money, right? Including the Muslims don't care. That's why they're making connections with the the Israelis. It's called the Abraham Accords. It's just like it's just money based, right? So it's just kind of the big picture of what's going on. You can tell me if I'm wrong or something. I don't know for sure, but it seems to be all money related. Okay. So how do we combat that? I hate being like a victim. Okay. So I will roughly say the answer is, and I think the solutions are always simple. It might sound really boring, but the righteous will inherit the land. What does that mean? Okay, if you're reasonably good, you have some decent principles, you will take over all these countries. Okay, they'll increasingly become Muslim and controlled by Muslim. I'm not saying the Muslims are all that righteous, even, but more righteous than everybody else. Let's say, like they've got some principles. Okay, it's like family principles and stuff. Everybody, you just die out, and you just have all these Muslims running, uh, government. Let's say in the UK, and then that's the end of Israel, because as soon as that happens in America, you've got Muslims running it. You've got um, Muslims are in the UK. These are the two main countries that support Israel. Israel's finished. So it sounds boring, but actually the boring solutions are the ones that really work. Like the quiet invasion of England. How did that happen? Preaching, talking. What do you think?
I think on one level, like, I understand your sentiments, but going back to the sort of the concept of jihad, Hamas, and the stuff that's going on in Israel, I think at the end of the day, I think we're all just being played for idiots and dividing us. And really, we don't need to be, how would you call it, a normal a Jewish person, like just a normal everyday Jewish person and a normal everyday Palestinian, for instance, or Palestinian supporter. We don't need to be facing off against each other or protesting against each other. That's where they win. Uh, we all want peace. We all want a ceasefire. Then we shouldn't be arguing against each other, fireworks or that kind of aggression. We should be putting pressure at every level, at every institution, to get them to stop. Now, at this moment, that's the only way I see it. It's like we all put our differences aside, because if we don't put our differences aside, these people are going to carry on and they're going to divide and rule us. We don't
Okay,
need to.
this is a problem with what you're saying, right? It sounds good, right? Be good, what you're saying, right? Now, it's the same reason why, if you logically tell an atheist to have children, get married, and stay in that relationship, they don't, right? You have to have uh, this belief in God and know that God wants you to be forgiving, right? That's the thing that makes Ahmadis different to all the rest of the Muslims. Okay, we're the only ones who say, you know what, love for all, hatred for none. If I say that in Speaker's Corner, all the Muslims are shocked. They're like, what are you talking about? Even though that's fundamentally part of Islam. In the Quran, Prophet Muhammad is told you have not been sent except as a mercy for all of God's creation. All of God's creation. Okay, so like if so it's not going to happen. Logic. If you unless they become, I'm going to give the really short answer. You can tell people things logically, but they won't do it. Just like atheists won't have children, even if they know they're going to die out, right? Okay. Even these right wing people that I've been talking to, right? They know the answer and they're not going to do it. Only when I'll give you the really, really short answer. If they become Ahmadi Muslims, then you're going to have peace, because we're the only people who do that, like this kind of stuff, and say these kind of answers. And these really people just want really exciting short answers. They want to go on a protest and they want to write a letter to their MP as if that's going to change anything. Things don't change like that. Things change really slowly, just like what's happening in the UK. It changed over time. People didn't see it coming. Nobody saw it coming, and it started happening, and the Muslims were taking over. It didn't happen. People just don't like it. They want the short-term solutions, but Islam says do things consistently, even if they're small. That's the real change, and nobody likes that because it's not exciting enough. What do you think about that?
I think I'm going to go along with what you're saying as far as Ahmadiyism goes. Yeah, I think the world would be a lot better place if Ahmadi was the sort of dominant Muslim
Let me
religion.
ask you a question though.
Go on.
This thing about exciting, I'll end it with this, right? I think people just want exciting, short solutions. They want to protest and they want it to all the problems be solved, but they don't want to do something slowly every day. What do you think about that?
The, the modern
They don't want
world
to
is
make the world a bit better slowly every day by, let's say, making friends with their neighbors and then
no.
building their community. That's that boring stuff. That's actually gonna save everything. Like, okay, if you want to get a better government, right? All you have to do is get together as a society. But there's no such thing as a society anymore. That's all broken down.
Yes.
So the fundamentals, nobody wants to do it. I used to, in my area, it was only the Ahmadi Muslims who got everybody together. We used to do barbecues. They had a neighborhood organization, but it was didn't work. Only the Ahmadi Muslims could get the whole, all the non-Muslims and whatever, everybody together, right? Um, so the reality is, it's the really boring, selfless, day by day, year on year stuff that's going to save society. And everybody just wants to protest and wants it to be over right now. But that's not how the world works. I think. Am I wrong? I don't know. Do you want to tell me?
No, whatever it is, I like the way that you're viewing the world and your internal argument against me. Obviously, I wanted to come across as very martial, but you presented such a unique viewpoint. How on earth do you debate with a really peaceful Muslim?
That is another thing.
it's,
Exactly. You
it's
pacify
impossible.
all the Zionists. I've been debating Zionists. I've got a Zionist friend who's just asking me for personal help all the time. I've been in Speaker's Corner with the most famous Zionist, and he was like, "Oh crap, don't." He did a video, but he didn't want to put it up. I recorded and I put it on my YouTube channel about the solution, and he was like, "No, I'm not." Like, it was a peaceful solution, and everybody else hates him and keeps threatening him, right? So yeah, you're right. Love is going to pacify everybody. Basically, they'll be
It's
like they
quite
want
good.
to fight and they won't.
It's quite
Yeah,
good, like I says. I mean, even with me, I still have that level, but okay, violence starts now. Here we go.
yeah.
Whereas you really stick to your sort of peace and wanting to sort of go forward, and it's respect to you because you're the first Muslim. Well, actually, I never thought I would be having this kind of conversation with a Muslim and being defeated almost with your kind of peaceful philosophy. It wasn't what I expected, but very interesting, Khalid. I hope I sort of
Thank you for keeping me
yeah,
company.
company.
But it was good. We had important discussions. Thank you very much. Looking forward to our conversation tomorrow as well on who is God. That'll be very interesting. All right. Peace be upon you,
take
Uncle.
take care. Good evening.
You
Peace.
too. Good evening. Bye.